Welcome to Power Up Your Practice, the go-to podcast for law firm owners and managing attorneys working on the business, not in it. I'm Ruby Powers, your guide into the heart of law practice management, bringing your insights from leading legal minds, trailblazing attorneys, and expert guests who provide practical perspectives on running your firm more effectively and efficiently. And before we dive in, I'm thrilled to announce that my latest book, Power Up Your Practice, is out and available on Amazon. It's packed with actionable advice for growing a successful law firm. Be sure to grab your copy today. And don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter for exclusive tips and resources. And if you're enjoying this podcast, we love your reviews. They help us reach more attorneys like you who are striving to build the practice of their dreams. Prepare to open your mind, be inspired, and power up your practice to the next level. Welcome, everyone, to Power Up Your Practice. I'm your host, Ruby Powers, and we're guiding you through the ever-evolving world of law practice management and what is going on. So many crazy things. I'm so excited to have Damien Riehl. He is the VP of Solutions Champion. He's a Solutions Champion. I'll have him explain at vLex. And I have been honored to see him be a keynote at the ALA Tech Summit back in September in Dallas. And every time he speaks or sings at an ABA or affiliated of some sort type of event, it's always a delight. So thank you for joining us today, Damien.
I'm so thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for having me on, Ruby.
Going to the title that I sort of butchered, I guess. What is your title?
The title VP Solutions Champion is a made-up title pretty much for a made-up job. And my job is I build in the morning with my team in London and Barcelona. I build products, and then I talk about the stuff I've built in the afternoon. I talk about it on podcasts like this and to law firms and to corporations. So Solutions Champion means that in the morning, I champion solutions that, hey, we should build these things. So that is a solution that we're building. And then in the afternoon, I take those solutions and I champion those to my customers to be able to say, here are the solutions that will be really good for you. And then in the afternoon, my customers say, gosh, you know what else you should build? You should build X, Y, and Z. And then in the morning, I'm really championing those solutions to my product team to say, hey, we should really build X, Y, and Z. And then we build that the next day. So it's a virtuous cycle of solutions champion, both from the product to the customer and from the customer back to the product.
Wait, so it's happening that fast, like in just like half day increments? Really?
Often, yes. So like everything a lawyer does is a workflow. And within a workflow are multiple tasks. And so we can build tasks and workflows I can build, a task in maybe 15 minutes and then multiple tasks to create a workflow in an hour or so. So yeah, it is very quickly iterative.
Wow. Okay. Well, that sounds like a really fun job. I hope it's not a make-believe paycheck. I hope you get like, you get
as far as I know, it's US dollars. Even though my company is based in Barcelona, it is actually US dollars.
Do you have to like wake up really early, or like you just work the second half? Your morning is their second half of the day.
So in high school I delivered newspapers, so I was up at 4:30 a.m. every day, and so I'm an early bird from a long time. So I often would start my days with my team in Barcelona and London at maybe 6:30 or 7:30 a.m. my time, and then that makes for quite long days. But I will take. I think I've maybe the best job in legal technology, and so I will take those early mornings any day of the week.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I remember when I ran my law firm from Dubai, like keeping track of when all the different times and being able to work a little bit longer hours to drag out the day in the US. Okay, so there's a lot going on in AI. Honestly, I think there's the people who talk about it, and there's like different tiers. I think you're like at one of the top tiers of the people who talk about it. So I was really excited to have you on. So AI is advancing, and we're seeing a lot of exponential growth. Let's talk to the people who are really on board. The people who are like, I don't know. We'll let them catch up later, but let's talk at a higher level of like what's going on, where you foresee things, and from the business of law and some of the substantive work.
Yeah. Let's talk about. So I think the substantive law and the business of law are really interrelated. That is on the substantive law parts. Think about every single thing a lawyer does is based on words. That is, we ingest words, we analyze words, and we output words. And it turns out that large language models can do all three of those things at superhuman speed and at a postgraduate level. That is, it beat PhDs in physics in their areas, and it's now beat the ARC-AGI prize, which is the Artificial General Intelligence prize. And so the models are reaching exponential growth, and soon they will probably exceed even the smartest of us in the lawyers. And so if we think about, since everything we as lawyers do is based on words, doctors, sometimes put a scalpel into somebody, right? Or doctors actually have to do blood tests or something like that. So the doctors have kind of a diagnostic aspect of it where they speak to you, and then kind of a physical aspect where they actually have to put hands on you. But lawyers have none of the physical side. All they have to do, all we have is words. And because AI can do words really well, I think we can think about how many aspects of legal work can be actually helped with large language models. And a friend of mine has a post-it note on his monitor saying, "Can AI help with this?" And the answer is probably yes. Whatever you happen to be doing at that moment, AI can probably help. And so it's a matter of us discovering what those things are.
I agree with like most of that. And I'm an immigration attorney, so there's like some things that like being in front of the client, and yeah, we're trying to elicit words, but like sometimes like the body language or the connection. I mean, I was at 2 asylum interviews last week, for example, getting that out of them, what I needed to their story. I think there's still room for that connection being made.
I 100% agree. And yeah, I did say everything we do is based on words. And I think you've correctly said that I'm wrong there. And I think that's true. That almost everything that we do is words. But a lot of it is communication. I should have said everything we do is communication. Some of that is verbal, that is through words, and a lot of that is nonverbal. That is body language. And I think that nonverbal aspect of it is really, as large language models do more of our work, that body language is going to come to the fore as the most important aspect of what we as human lawyers are going to be giving to our clients. To be able to say, to be able to look that client in the eye and say, your problem is now my problem. That is, I have your back, that we're in this together and we're going to do this together. So that kind of giving trust to the client is really why all of us went to law school in the first place, to be able to help people in this way. And I think that as the paperwork gets done by large language models, that trust and that humanity coming to the fore, that's going to be the most important aspect of the work the lawyers do.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of times people were saying, oh, it's like a first year associate or an intern or something. And then now this last 6 months, I've been hearing a lot of people say a 5-year associate, that it's can sort of, mimic or what have you. But now you're saying, and you're also saying like a graduate student. And so when people tell me like, oh, it can't do this yet or it can't do that yet, I'm also like, well, do you know to do the prompt engineering? Are you asking it the right way? That those are some of my first questions. But
yeah,
anyway.
and really, when we think about where we are societally with large language models, there is ChatGPT out of the box, where yes, you really need to know how to prompt to be able to really get the best out of it. But then you also have, and that's option one, is ChatGPT or other large language models generally. Option number two is kind of a built for legal tool, where Sam Altman was asked on stage, "What do you think of the ascendance of prompt engineering as a field?" And Sam Altman said, "Ugh, I hope that's not a thing in a year. Because if I'm doing my job correctly, you won't have to be a prompt engineer. All you have to do is ask me a question and I'll give you an answer." So we at vLex and with my team at Vincent, if we're doing our jobs correctly, you won't have to be prompt engineers. All you have to do is upload a PDF and we'll give you all of the outputs, no prompting necessary. And what you won't see are the 35 prompts in the background that we're doing so you don't have to. So number one, ChatGPT out of the box, you have to be a prompt engineer. Number two, build for legal tools, you probably won't.
Actually, I'm having a flashback. I remember now, because I remember you saying that in September in Dallas, and Greg Siska and I was talking about the prompt engineering and the whole sort of like who believes which one's going to be the future. And, just like trying to avoid needing a mouse or a monitor or, to be more of less of an interface between us and our computers is just reducing that need of the prompt engineering and make it easier for more fluid. I I remember you saying that now that I think about it. So I don't know who's winning, but maybe you are.
and I really like so I like that you brought up Greg Siskin, because few lawyers that I know are better at building code and thinking in a systems way than Greg Siskin. I mean, like that person is amazing. And shout out to Greg. He's doing amazing things. And so I think that Greg knew HTML before knowing HTML was cool, right? And he built blogs before it was cool. And so this really goes to, should lawyers know how to prompt engineer? Really goes to, in the past, the question, do lawyers need to know how to code? Or do they need to know HTML? And the answer is, if you're Greg Siskin, totally, you should, because you could be able to do things faster, better, stronger if you know how to code like he does, and if you know how to prompt like he does. But now today, if if I want to build a website, you don't have to know HTML like Greg Siskin needed to. You just go to Wix or Squarespace or something else. And even though it's helpful kind of to know HTML, you really don't need to know HTML. So I wonder if we're going to reach the same thing with prompt engineering, where it's going to be helpful to know how prompt engineering works, just to know, just like it was useful to know HTML. But just like you don't need to code HTML anymore, maybe you won't need to prompt in the future.
No, I agree with you. And like the whole no code coding is like so popular because a lot of people don't live in that space. I think I remember that now because I did C++ in like high school. I was getting like college credit. And I was hanging out with a lot of I think I was one of the few females in the room, let's just say. But I really enjoyed doing that early on because when I later had my own website for my law firm, I knew how to edit it, or if I did other things, like I wasn't waiting around for somebody to make the change. Things have gotten more complicated and I'm doing other things, but I agree with you. Like, I think for the majority of attorneys, they're not going to be in that space and they're going to want somebody else, want it to be easier of use.
I think that's right. And, in about 2015, I pitched Thomson Reuters. I said, here's legal tech that can change the world. You should build it and hire me. And they were dumb enough to do that. So I worked for TR for a bunch of years, a couple of years. And really my job was as a subject matter expert. Up to that point, I'd litigated for about 15 years. As a subject matter expert, my job was to write down requirements to be able to say, here's everything I want the software to do so that I can hand them off to the software development team to actually build the software. But we're in a weird world right now where the requirements are the software. That is, the requirements that I wrote is essentially a prompt that you don't need a software development team to do. Essentially, I, as a subject matter expert, can write those requirements, write that prompt that the large language model is able to execute on that prompt. So really, as we go forward, I think that lawyers should be realizing that their subject matter expertise, their expertise in immigration law or in family law or whatever type of law that you're in, that expertise is your software ability. You don't need to be a prompt engineer. You just need to say, here are the things I want the software to do in plain language, and then be able to transfer that. That'll automatically be transferred into a prompt. And it turns out that lawyers, since we're really good at words and really good at language, the best of us can be really good prompt engineers. Because what makes a good prompt is something that is very clear, that is unambiguous, that is directly asking for what is done. So you can imagine if you say something in the passive voice, this needs to be done, that is not nearly as good as you need to do this, right? So because we as lawyers tend to write in active voice, because we write unambiguously, we tend to be pretty good prompt engineers if we put our minds to it.
Well, that's a nice byproduct of our education and training.
Yeah, you didn't know you were a prompt engineer, but it turns out you can be.
Yeah, exactly. So what else do you think is happening in just AI in the practice of law? I heard of this thought from Jordan Furlong. I think it's been almost a year. It's been a year now, but that we're eventually going to get down to essential roles of lawyers will play in the post AI era of like advocating, advising, and accompanying. That's really struck me because I think so much of these AI conversations the last couple of years has been like, oh, are we still going to have a job? Are we still going to be needed? I think unfortunately a lot of people are in that fear space, which I don't choose to live in that space. I choose to live in like, what is the future? And let's see the opportunity and let's seize it, especially in the innovation adoption curve, like let's be the innovator or the early adopter. So
I 100% agree. Yeah, and Jordan Furlong is one of my favorite writers in this space. Every single thing he puts out, I voraciously read and almost 100% agree with. So, and I agree with him. He just spoke in Chicago at a conference I was at, and yeah, I think advocacy is going to remain. The bots aren't going to be arguing in front of a court. And the bots today, aren't going to be negotiating with the other side for immigration things, or negotiating with the other side for a contract thing, or a family law marital dispute. I think that what makes us human is what is going to rise to the fore, and that is advocacy, and also just the things that we, at least for the time being, don't want the bots to do. So an example of that is TurboTax. I have been doing my taxes with TurboTax for a bunch of years, and I also still hire an accountant. because I want the accountant to look me in the eye and say, am I getting too close here? Because there are things that TurboTax knows, and then there are things that my accountant knows that's saying, the accountant can say, during these other audits, my client got a little too close. But the data on those other audits aren't in TurboTax. The data for those other audits is in that accountant's brain. So in the same way, for lawyers, there's a lot of stuff stuck in your brain that is not in my cases, my statutes, and my regulations at vLex that still matter. And so really the question is how much of the work that is currently stuck in your and my brain as lawyers, how quickly do we take that information and put it into an artifact that is something that the large language models can be able to then use that knowledge in a tangible way to be able to give your clients better, faster, stronger work product. And I think the winners will be people that can use large language models as they are today on the cases, statutes, and regulations, and then also take the stuff in their brains and put them into artifacts that the large language models can use too.
Wow. Yeah, I'm thinking of a lot of different things because I was on a call earlier today where we were talking about if we had a place where we put all the information from all like the updates, and then we could just curate, do a query out there, which I know those already exist, but like have a larger database of like immigration information. But then there, you're right, like the whole practice of law aspect is because we see patterns of cases that we see, and a lot of times they're not written up necessarily of all the different stories that are in our head.
Right. And that tricky part about writing it up, like it hasn't been written up in the past because it's been really expensive to write it up, both in cost and in time. But we all have these things in our pockets, these phones in our pockets.
Yeah.
And so you can imagine for every single interview you have with a client, if you record that interview, transcribe that interview, and be able to then afterwards use as a prompt, say something like, what are the variables in this interview that move the needle from this way to that way? What are the things that matter in this discussion that I'm going to put into this immigration form, or that I'm going to put into this family law dissolution? So if we can transcribe, which is cheaper than ever these days, pretty much close to free, and then extract what matters from that transcription, now we can start taking stuff from our brains and taking stuff from our client meetings and be able to turn that into actionable items that the large language models can then parse.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought about doing that. Exactly.
And what people have to get past is they're saying, well, how about attorney-client privilege? Is the recording privileged, and am I giving it to somebody that maybe breaks privilege? And to that, I respond, I thought we kind of settled that with email. Is emailing somebody my client confidential information breaking privilege? Is it sending it through Google's servers or through Microsoft servers? Is that breaking privilege? And the answer is, of course not, right? I trust Microsoft, I trust Google to not break that privilege. So in the same way, if Google or Microsoft are running that transcription service on Azure or on Google Cloud, how is that any different? And so really, you don't break privilege by doing that. And if you trust the tools that are transcribing it and trust the tools that are extracting it, then privilege is still A-okay.
So it seems like what we've got to figure out is how to just sort of skim up the top, what is the human element of what we do, and use AI for all the things that we don't need to be a human for.
That's right. And I think that that list of the things that we don't necessarily need our humanity for is going to increase and increase and increase.
Yeah, I agree. I'm having conversations with individuals, like especially like law firm owners and such. Like there are so many different spectrums. Like some are like, I don't even know what ChatGPT is. Okay, so I don't really talk to them that much, those individuals. And then there's like the people who are like, I have this bot, and then I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that, and then we're going to put all the, and I'm all like, yeah, tell me more. Let's do it.
Yeah. I think those will be the winners. And I think that your solo small audience is really going to be the winners in this game. I sell, Vincent, we sell it to the biggest law firms in the world, all the way to the smallest law firms in the world. And the biggest law firms in the world have a big problem that the smallest law firms don't. And that is compensation. That is, if you have a big law firm, say 1,000 lawyers, 500 of them are stuck in the billable hour world. And they're saying, okay, you're going to take the billable hour out of my cold, dead hands, right? That's 500 of them. 500 of the others realize that with large language models, if you shrink your cost, you increase your profit margin. So 500 of those say, no, I'm going to go flat fee. because I'm going to shrink my cost and increase my profit margin. Or as Matthew Kerber says, I'm going to go subscription fee. Or as the contingency fee lawyers say, I'm going to go contingency fee. All three of those, you shrink your cost, you increase your margins. So if you're big law, 500 lawyers are hourly, 500 lawyers are flat fee. Now, if you have an associate that works with partner A, that is hourly, and partner B, that is flat fee, and at the end of the year, December 31st, that associate bills 3,000 hours, which makes partner A hourly a ton of money, but costs partner B a ton of money. That is, you're making partner A happy and you're making partner B very unhappy. So how do you compensate that associate? Do you emphasize give me more hours to make partner A happy, or give me less hours and be more efficient, which is what will make partner B happy? And so Big Law has this big dilemma. Do they switch over their entire fee structure, their whole compensation model to flat fees? And that's a hard answer. But a solo small lawyer can flip to flat fees like that. You as a solo can say, nope, this afternoon from here on out, we're just going to do flat fee, or we're just going to do subscription fee, or we're just going to do contingency fee or outcome based. And you don't have to worry about that compensation. Now, all of your associates, all of your, everyone's now aligned to say, if I shrink my cost, if I do things faster, better, stronger, then we'll make the firm more money. So we're going to run faster.
Yeah. It's sort of like moving a cruise ship around, or the Evergreen or whatever that was called in the Panama. like, and I've seen that happen multiple times. Like when I started my law firm in 2009, like, I could sort of, compete with Big Law in a way, because the cloud was there. There was a lot more, it was a cheaper barrier to entry. We, not necessarily Big Law, but like there was a lot of changes going on in that time and space. But I feel like we're at another pivotal moment as well right now with AI. And so I consult with a lot of starting law firms and or those who are trying to leverage AI and the technology. And I mean, honestly, if you don't have the overhead, like that's just like with a lot of the big firms during the pandemic, a lot of times the reason they're bringing them back into the office is because they have these leases and all these expenses. But I get what you're saying. And I think this is also what this whole conversation of like getting over to flat fee or subscription as soon as possible. I think we've been to a lot of the same tech conferences the last you way more than me, but like the last couple year or so, and pretty much the death of the billable hour just keeps on coming up all the time. And yeah, I mean, I moved my litigation over to hourly 7 years ago, but I really want to move it back over to flat immediately. And you're right, I could probably just say today, henceforth, we are going to flat fee, but I just haven't done it because I was trying to wrap my head on how we're going to do it. Yeah, Matthew told me he's going to have me on his podcast as a subscription therapy to get me moved over.
I fully support Matthew in that endeavor. And when you think about the trend that we're talking about, where solo smalls can boom more nimbly than their big law brothers and sisters, I would say that this kind of follows the trend that ChatGPT's product owner, his name is Peter Chen, said that the number of massive companies, say 10,000 person companies or more, is going to shrink. Because he said, as we move into our agentic futures, what's to keep maybe 5 people from jumping ship from that company, starting their own company, and having their 10,000 LLM agents underneath them doing the work of 10,000 people. And so I think that he's probably right. And now substitute the word business with law firm. That is number of 10,000 person law firms. What's to keep any 5 lawyers from that law firm from jumping ship, from creating their own boutique law firm where they're all flat fee or they're all subscription, and then being able to have their 10,000 large language model associates underneath them and doing the work of 10,000 lawyers. And I think that that is going to be an unlock. That is, the winners are going to realize that you don't need the Manhattan real estate. You don't need the all of the typing pool of the days gone by. You don't need the receptionists. You don't need the legal administrative assistants. Really, a lot of this work can be done by large language models. And if everyone's working from home anyway, why don't you just go ahead and lower your overhead and do the work of 10,000 people with your 10,000 large language model bots, like we're building at Vincent?
Yeah, I agree. Like when we were moving our case management software a year ago, I said, I don't want to hire any more people until I know what we actually need and how efficient we can be. And I think that's what I mean by it's another pivotal moment, just like when the cloud and the smartphone came out, and like 08, 09, around that, 07, around that time. We're in that other space in AI in the last couple of years, and how smaller firms can compete with larger firms. And in fact, like you're saying, it's almost like an advantage because they don't have as much overhead and they can be more nimble in that transition. Um,
Yeah, I worked at a big firm, Robbins Kaplan, and we had a group that the full name was Robbins Kaplan Miller and Cerisi. So Mike Cerisi jumped ship, and he created a law firm along with Jan Conlon called Cerisi Conlon, and they did this I think 8 or 9 years ago. And even 8 or 9 years ago, they said we don't need a huge administrative staff, we don't need a bunch of paralegals, we don't need a bunch of trial prep people, because as trial comes up, we can just bring those people on as independent contractors and then spin them off. So we can essentially outsource all of these works. And that was 8 or 9 years ago. So you can imagine that they are now pivoting to be able to say, how can AI be able to help do our work faster, better, stronger? And by the way, a lot of their work is contingency fee. So they realize if they spend less time, they make more money.
So, what are some of the other advancements that you think we're going to see in substantive and the business of law?
I think that there's a saying by I forget who the sci-fi writer is, but the future is here. It's just not evenly distributed. And I think that what the future is, the tools like we're building at Vincent is here, but not a lot of people know that Vincent can do amazing things. Therefore, people say ChatGPT isn't quite there yet. When the future is not ChatGPT, the future is things like Vincent. It's things like Greg Siskin's Gen. That's built for lawyers, that kind of work, to be able to make the workflows better, faster, stronger. I think that as we move forward, I think the future will be more evenly distributed. That is, people will know the tools that can make them faster, better, stronger, because the incumbents, that is the duopoly, they're not building amazing tools. But Greg's tool is amazing. Vincent's amazing. And so I think that there is going to be an education phase where people are going to figure out that there are better tools out there, and they're going to start using them.
And I teach a law class. I'm going to teach tonight, and I poll my students. It's like 40 of them. I'm like, so how many of your firms are using AI in some capacity? Because they usually work part-time, and not that many hands are up of the 40 students. And then when I was asking some other firms and stuff, I'm just trying to get a gauge of it, like what's going on. And I think it's because a lot of them were doing that. And I also saw, Bob did a summary of all the different AI reports that came out around the time of the ABA Tech Show, and sort of like what everybody's hesitations are and all that stuff. But like, but Bob Ambrogi. But what I think is it's a combination of, there was the hesitancy, and then there was like, okay, now we need to do something, but then what do we do? And then just sort of that lag time for some of the firms and attorneys. And I think also I've heard in the past, like, depending on, maybe you're on your last third of your career, maybe you're like, this isn't a me problem, that's like a next generation, or I'm just not going to deal with this or something. Like, I don't really think you have the luxury to say that. I think this is definitely, if you want to stay ahead, you need to be embracing this and finding ways to just be doing the human element and using the tech for all the things that could be automated.
Yeah, I think, the what do we do now is the right question that everybody's asking, and part of that is because ChatGPT essentially gives you a blank box, which might seem appealing at the beginning. Look, I can do anything with this blank box, but then you start being paralyzed. You're like, but I have no idea what to do. What can I do with this? Because I can do everything. Therefore, I'm doing nothing. So that beauty of the blank box is actually paralysis. It stems paralysis. So I think that tools like mine, you just upload a PDF. Upload a PDF to Vincent, and that is a complaint. And we'll give you a whole bunch of buttons, no prompting necessary, saying, do you want to analyze the claims? Do you want to analyze the facts in a timeline? Do you want to figure out what the defenses are to those claims? Do you want to figure out what are questions you could ask your client to help them win? You don't have to be a prompt engineer. We just give you those buttons. So there's no blank page problem. So I think that that you're right, that a lot of lawyers are saying, I don't know how I can use it, because they have that blank box of ChatGPT, and we can fix that. So that's thing number one. Thing number two is your really good point about, a lot of lawyers are nearing the twilight of their careers, and they some of them will say to me, Damien, I hope I retire before this all comes to pass. And in my brain, this doesn't come out of my mouth, but in my brain, I say, I hope so too. I hope you get out of the way so other people can be able to do the work that needs to be done. That is to move the profession forward. And I think that there is a real, I guess, appetite is a way to say it of the baby boomers are have more of an appetite for AI, that is large language models, than they ever have throughout my career. And I'm a Gen Xer, and this puzzled me. I thought, why would boomers really like to have AI? And I talked to my friend Jay who is maybe one of the smartest people in legal tech and figuring out how people are going to make money. I asked Jay about this, and she said, "Oh, it's because they've already made their money. They can essentially throw the match behind them, and maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, right? But let's give it a shot, right?" And I think that's probably right.
Nothing to lose, maybe.
Yeah, nothing to lose, right? They've already got their nest egg. So the boomers throw the match over their shoulders, and the Xers like me, we're in the maybe 2/3 mark of our career.
Yeah.
We still need to figure it out, and certainly the millennials do too, and Gen Z as well. So I think now everyone's aligned. The boomers want to do it, as do the Xers, as to everybody, saying yes, let's get things done.
Yeah, that's a refreshing way to think about it. Okay, so we were both in this session about access to justice at the ABA Tech Show, and it was getting really interesting. Like the discussion was, the presentation was great, but then also the discussion was happening, like, and there's like disagreement and things like that. And so, I'm going to admit I had never heard of the concept justice tech. Okay, I admit it. Until I was at ABA Tech Show just recently. But I mean, I'm really in that space because I do asylum law, I'm immigration. A lot of clients can't afford things, or so they say. But I think we live in this space where we, as responsibility and as attorneys, we want to touch everything, the full compass. But I really believe we're going to find a way to segregate, unbundle, limit the scope. And so I don't have a way to succinctly say what I'm trying to say, but like I'm really into this whole access to justice, justice tech, limited scope, help low tech folks. So anyway, let's discuss. What are your thoughts on that?
I have lots of thoughts on that, and
Okay.
And for the readers and listeners context, the Minnesota State Bar Association's greeting from St. Paul, Minnesota. Minnesota has appointed me chair of an AI committee, which is overseeing an AI sandbox that is saying that if you are using AI to help the poor, that is the 92% of legal needs that are unmet because we lawyers are too expensive,
Wow.
then you will not be prosecuted for the unauthorized practice of law.
Oh, wow.
So that is something that we're currently working with the Supreme Court to be able to make what I've said through an edict or some other letter of some sort, to be able to allow this kind of experimentation with AI to be able to help that 92%. And Chief Justice Roberts put in his 2023 end of year letter saying that we should use AI to help poor people because we have that 92% that is really being unhelped by current needs. We can't pro bono our way out of 92%.
Yeah.
So maybe we can AI our way out of it. And so the idea is that think about, let's give a face to the abstract, and let's say Jane. Jane's she got discriminated against, so she's got a legitimate claim, but she makes $18,000 a year, and the legal aid cutoff is $17,000. So she makes too much to get legal aid, but far too little to hire any lawyer. And so really the question is, what do we do for Jane, who makes $18,000, and all the way up to, what do you think, $100,000 before you can start affording, $200 an hour legal fees? So between $18,000 a year and $100,000 a year, do we just say to them, tough, you don't get a lawyer? Or do we say, okay, on the left-hand side, we do nothing for you? A little better than that is saying, go ahead and Google it. And that Googling sucks, right? Because if you're in California, you get New York law, right? A little better than plain old Googling is using ChatGPT, which a lot of people use ChatGPT for legal work. An appellate judge said, after ChatGPT came out, my pro se litigants briefs became way better, right? So people are now using ChatGPT, which is better than Googling, but still doesn't have yesterday's case, doesn't have yesterday's statute, right? Yeah. Better than that, maybe we should give people ChatGPT plus yesterday's case, plus yesterday's statute. So that's even better on that spectrum. A little better than that is maybe giving those things and a justice worker, that is somebody who's maybe worked for the past 20 years in housing, to be able to help them through that housing problem with yesterday's case and ChatGPT. A little bit better than that is maybe a bad lawyer A little better than that is maybe a medium-sized, a mediocre lawyer, and better than that is the best lawyer in the world, right? So we are putting everyone on the spectrum, whether we like it or not. And do we say to poor people, no, you're going to be stuck with plain old Googling, but we're going to pat you on the head and say it's for your own good. We're trying to protect you from the evils of ChatGPT or the evils of something else. And so that, I think that if we say that and pat them on the head and saying, no, you're stuck with plain old Googling, even when lawyers like you and me are using ChatGPT every day to make our work better, faster, stronger, and even though we don't need ChatGPT nearly as much as the poor people do, if we pat them on the head, then we should be ashamed of ourselves. And if you think about it, like, okay, if the whole unauthorized practice of law statute was meant to protect the hoi polloi, those poor unwashed masses, from the evil non-lawyers that are seeking to do them harm, we should definitely sue OpenAI for ChatGPT. We should definitely sue Google. We should definitely sue Microsoft, because who is committing more unauthorized practice of law than ChatGPT and Google? How many hundreds of thousands of legal questions are going into ChatGPT every single day? And if we as a bar association don't go after ChatGPT, and we don't go after Google, and we don't go after Microsoft, are we really trying to protect the hoi polloi? Or are we just trying to protect our business models?
Okay. Well, so I see things a little differently in the immigration space, because in just the last couple of months, they've said that if you file something that is not sufficient enough, or if it, let's say it gets denied, it could send you to immigration court. Another thing they just came out with is that if your asylum application is deficient, then the judges can pre-termit it. And you're right, a whole bunch of notarios, like people who say they can fill out forms, and as an immigration attorney, our profession is more than just that. Did the bare bones basics, and a whole bunch of those cases are now coming up for interviews 9-10 years later, and or are going to be popping up in front of judges, for review. So I sort of find a middle ground between what are the perspectives. Like, I agree that, like, we need to find some unbundled, limited scope, more options, and I'm grateful for a lot of those programs that are coming out there that are trying to make it more accessible. Because the more I've been in this space, the more I realize there's such a huge latent market, and there's so many people not getting what they need. In fact, a lot of people don't even know it's a legal issue, or which attorney or where or how or whatever. But then I'm also concerned about those who, if you like, sometimes they liken immigration court to, like, what do they say, like traffic court, but with a death penalty. Unfortunately, but it's true. It's really true. And so, but honestly, I've been seeing just this whole mentality where I think we're just so concerned about all our responsibility. Like, there's a disconnect between, like, we're so risk adverse as attorneys that we want to be able to see the whole picture, and then we don't like the idea of just a bite size aspect. Like, someone came in yesterday and she was like, I don't want to talk about my asylum claim. I just want to talk about my marriage-based adjustment. And I'm like, that's nice that you're so confident that that's all you want to talk about. But, like, it's not like you go to a doctor and say, I only want to talk about my left arm, not my right arm, even though both of them don't work or something. Like, it's all connected. And so anyway, but finding some of, like, that balance, I feel like that mentality shift, it's not just about throwing tech into it. It's about, like, changing the culture and the mindset of the attorney and the law practice that's going to help solve part of this issue.
I think that's right. And so I think that if you can think of it like meeting in the middle, that is, lawyers like you can be able to say, how can I use AI to reduce the price point to be able to help Jane better, right? So maybe you can't say, well, $18,000 a year, but maybe you can get, from 100,000 to somebody who makes 75,000 to be able to afford you, or maybe if somebody makes 40,000, maybe you can reduce the price point to be able to get the average income of Jane to be a place where you could do it, and then maybe from the bottom end, then Jane could be able to say at $18,000, she could still get okay, not great, but okay advice from ChatGPT plus yesterday's case, plus yesterday's immigration thing. And then if she has enough money, she can then afford you to be able to give you better for obvious reasons. And so I think that, too many lawyers think, well, of course you should hire me. And I agree. Of course they should hire you if they can afford you. But try to tell Jane at making $18,000 a year, of course they should hire you, right? She can't afford you. And so she's, so between hiring you, which she can't, and using ChatGPT, she's probably going to use ChatGPT, right?
Yeah.
And so we need to deal with this reality. So while we can, lawyers should shrink at their cost to shrink the access to justice gap using large language models. But for those making $18,000 a year that don't qualify for legal aid, we can't just tell them tough. Hire me, even though you can't afford me.
I completely agree with that. And this last week or two, I had a colleague mention the movie Blackberry, and so I watched that. But it was, and I'm trying to think like that they came up with the Blackberry where it was in that moment, but then they weren't able to take it to the next level with the iPhone, the smartphone. But then they also told me to read the Blue Ocean Strategy, and I'd heard about the book. But anyway, I'm almost done. But I'm just like thinking about this in the access to justice and Blue Ocean. Like, there's lots of different ways, like segmenting out the work, helping people do it yourself a little bit, courses, subscription. There's a lot there. I'm ruminating over that right now.
Yeah. There's a lot to be said with innovation with tech and innovation with legal. I think that both thinking differently, even though Apple said think different, is something that we should be doing.
Yeah, I agree. Well, we'll have to continue to keep this dialogue on the access to justice because that is something I'm really intrigued about. But and I know we've got to solve it because not only that, there's a shortage of immigration attorneys who know how to do immigration court and do detained work, and we're at a sort of a moment where I think we're going to need a lot of those in this space.
I think so too. And as we close on the access to justice portion, we should really think as lawyers, what is the difference between legal information and legal advice? Because legal advice is prohibited under the unauthorized practice of law statute, but legal information is cases, statutes, regulations, rules, right? These are legal information that everybody should have access to, even if you don't have a lawyer, right? We should have access to cases. So when you think about what is legal information, think about if I, as a poor person, have a question, is marijuana legal in my state? We'll call that question number one. Is marijuana legal in my state? That's right in the statute, right? It says where marijuana is legal, in what instances, is it medical marijuana, is it recreational? Like that's right in the statute. That's legal information. So that's you don't need to be a lawyer to tell somebody whether Google's whether it's marijuana is legal. So question number two, though, can I possess marijuana? Now that's trickier because now that's applying my facts to the law, which has historically been maybe legal advice. But really, if you think about it, how different is number one than number two? Is marijuana legal? Can I have marijuana? It's kind of pretty much the same question, right? And then number three, can she have marijuana? Now I'm applying it to the third party, kind of the same question as number one and two, right? Is marijuana legal in my state? And then question number four, should I get marijuana? That should kind of pretty closely puts it into legal advice, right? So imagine if somebody uses a legal tool and that legal tool uses a large language model to say, I know that you asked question 2 or question 3 or question 4. I'm not going to answer that. I'm only going to answer number 1. Is marijuana legal in my state? And I'm going to give you now a 10-page memo that is legal information on whether marijuana is legal in your state. And by the way, it's going to be able to include all the caveats like a treatise would have on, think about a treatise on marijuana would have all the caveats saying, well, it's legal in this instance, but not legal in that instance. And turns out, instance X and instance Y will be what the user asked for, the client asked for. So as we think about what is really the difference between legal information and legal advice, with large language models, there is no difference. It is really all the same thing.
I hadn't thought about that, but I mean, I give a lot of legal information on my videos, like TikTok and Instagram and YouTube.
That's right. And you're not creating legal relationships with any of your listeners, right? And so what if the large language model gave that same legal information? Or what if a tool that's focused on the poor people, that is the Janes making $18,000 a year, what if they just give legal information?
Well, a lot to think about, but I mean, basically that could happen. I mean, that we're there, the technology is there. So it's just a matter of time or putting it out in the space. And the other program that I remember learning about at the ABA Tech Show, sort of like really targeted in that as well, was Describe.ai, a legal search engine. And they had like $10 or $20 price point or something, but they were really focused on the access to justice space.
Yeah, Describe is great. Kara and Richard are doing amazing things.
Yeah. That's where I was having a great conversation about the justice tech. Okay, so I know you're a fast talker, but so we're going to have to ask the last few questions really quickly. So what is your favorite board game and why?
My family really likes Wits and Wagers. I don't know if you ever used it, but Wits and Wagers is it's really fun. Where you there's a question like a Trivial Pursuit question saying, how many what's the maximum number of hot dogs eaten by the world record holder, right? And something that nobody really will know, and everybody writes down a number, and then everybody puts down the numbers face up and in a distribution curve. And if the middle of the distribution curve, if you everybody then bets on which one they think it is of everybody's, and if it's in the middle of the distribution curve, you get like a 1-to-1 output. But if it's on the ends of the distribution curve, you can get like a 10-to-1 thing, and so output. So it plays with math. And even young kids can do it because anybody can throw any number out there, right? And then they can still win by betting on the one that they think is actually accurate. So Wits and Wagers is one of my family's favorite games, both for the math aspect and also the idea is that when we don't often think in our daily lives in the matter of statistics of the bell curve. And so this really says that, each of us can have statistical bell curve. And sometimes, the exceptions to the rules are on the edges of that bell curve. So anyway, that's Wits and Wagers.
I'm not shocked that your favorite game involves math and statistics. But I'm sort of shocked that you can get your family into it, but that's great. That's great. Okay. So, and also that was the first time that game was ever mentioned on all of our almost 60 something episodes. So I'll have to look into that one because I'm always learning new games.
It's a great game.
What is your superpower?
A former employer said, Damien, you're an information processing machine. And he said it, I don't know if he said it as a compliment or an insult, but I took it as a compliment. I think that being able to process information is probably my superpower. Often I'll process it too quickly in that I'll expect everybody else to be able to process it at the same time, and then I'll get frustrated with them and they get frustrated with me. So if there is a superpower, it's probably information processing.
I think that's a good one for you. Yeah. What is a habit that contributes to your success?
Habit or hobby?
Habit.
Oh, habit. Okay. So I would say a habit. I would say there's my historical answer and then there's my current answer. My historical answer, I ran every day for 5 years or so. Like every day I would get up at 5:30, I would run 5 miles. And that was a habit that I did partially because I thought wouldn't it be cool to say you ran 5 miles a day? That was essentially, and then I ran for like 3 months straight. And I thought, oh, maybe I'll just keep this going. So I ran a bunch of years, and then I was running in DC where my desk is, and I was running around the Capitol grounds, and I tripped over the sidewalk on a buckle in the sidewalk and broke my collarbone and got a concussion. So anyway, so I haven't run really since then. So that was historically a habit that really cleared my mind. But this morning I ran again, and I ran last week a couple of times. So I'm getting back on the horse. So I'm going to say my habit is running.
Oh, okay. So that's your historical and your current one too?
Yeah, we'll see.
Okay. I'm glad you're back to it. And then what would be like your favorite book or podcast and you're just like, oh my gosh, you should definitely check that out?
I would say my favorite, I'll give you both a book and a podcast. Your listeners should definitely read Co-Intelligence by Ethan Mollick, Mollick. Book is named Co-Intelligence. He wrote it in late 23 as large language models were ascending. And Ethan is a Wharton School of Business MBA professor. So he's teaching business people how to use large language models. But everything that he says is equally applicable to lawyers. That is, you want to be able to say, lawyers are, after all, business people. And so every single piece of advice, you can read it in a few hours. It's a very accessible book. And every single book just has gold to be able to say, I hadn't thought about using LLMs, large language models to do that. So Co-Intelligence by Ethan Mollick is my book. And the podcast that I would recommend is the 2030 Vision, 2030 Vision. And that's run by the American Arbitration Association's Bridget McCormick and Jen Leonard. They are two brilliant people who really provide the most recent AI developments and put them in a way that is enjoyable and really understandable for the average person. So 2030 Vision and Co-Intelligence.
I think I read the 2030 book a few years ago.
So it's probably different. Yeah. So 2030 Vision is a podcast that I think is not related to the book.
Okay. Okay, got it. Well, that's great. I'll definitely check those both out. Well, Damien, how can people, I guess two closing thoughts. One, what would you say to those listeners, the sort of closing up like what we talked about today, and how can people find you and stay in touch?
Sure. I would say be curious. There's people often ask, how do I get to learn about large language models? And I would say that's kind of like asking, what book should I read to swim? And there's no book that you can read to swim. You just have to swim. So I would say to people, be curious and dip your toes into the large language model, and don't do it with the free models, which suck, but pay the $20 for 1 month. And for 1 month, get the better models and realize, oh, I can actually do a lot of my work with this. So be curious. And then where they can reach out to me is LinkedIn. I'm active there. I'm happy to chat about things that are all nerdy and legally.
Well, thank you I'm really glad to get you on, and I've enjoyed the conversation, and I think it's also inspired me to keep figuring out my access to justice, limited scope type of issue that I'm trying to figure out how to help more immigrant clients. Well, everyone, thanks for listening. Thanks for Damien for joining us today. There's just so much going on. We'll have to have you on some point in the future, and so much will change in that space. But it's an honor to have you, and lots of happening in AI, in the practice of law, and also the access to justice. And so we'll continue to see what you're up to. And you're a great resource to watch on LinkedIn. And I know you're out there speaking a lot and sort of keeping that conversation going. So thanks everyone for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Thank you for tuning in to the Power Up Your Practice Law Practice Management Podcast. I'm your host, Ruby Powers, and it's been a pleasure sharing this time with you. If you've enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to leave us a review, tell someone else about us, and we'd love to get this podcast shared with others to reach more listeners like you. Don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter for exclusive content, tips, and updates straight to your inbox. And exciting news, our book, The Power Up Your Practice, is out and available on Amazon. It's packed with strategies, 25 chapters, to help you elevate your practice and achieve your goals. So join us next week as we dive into more advice and insight on law practice management. We'll see you next time.